Buenas, Yokwe, Yok, Ali, Rananim, Kasalelia, Dan Hafade, Todos Hamzo. In recent years, there has been a sudden and dramatic increase in the interest in the Pacific Islands, largely spurred by the competition between China and the United States. This competition is often seen in military strategic terms and activities related to alliances and the positioning of military assets. The interaction between this attention and the political and economic development of the islands themselves is, of course, of primary concern to island leaders. Island leaders see security threats and existential threats posed by climate change and the economic viability of their societies. The United States has recently issued an Indo-Pacific Strategy which outlines American concerns in the Micronesian region, and this report is seen in light of the large military buildup in Guam and the Northern Marianas. And we must also acknowledge the lack of progress in completing the Compact of Free Association negotiations between the United States and the Federated States of Micronesia and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Discussions with the Republic of Palau are scheduled to begin next year. And so this knowledge and experienced leaders should be asked for their opinions. And so I'm happy through the Pacific Center for Island Security with the cooperation of PBS Guam to have the former presidents of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Republic of Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, and the Lieutenant Governor of Guam will engage in a conversation. So I will briefly introduce each of our participants today, and then I'll ask them to make a statement on their sense of security. We'll begin with women first. Her Excellency, Dr. Hilda Heine is a distinguished educator and leader in Micronesia. She's the first woman to be president of any Micronesian nation and is currently a member of the Nitijela. She was president of the Republic of the Marshall Islands from 2016 to 2020. His Excellency Emmanuel Manny Mori, is a highly regarded Micronesian leader with a strong business background. He served as senator from Chuk in the Congress of Micronesia from 1999 to 2007. He became president of the Federated States of Micronesia in 2007 and served for 8 years. His Excellency Tommy Remengesau Jr. has served a total of 16 years as president of the Republic of Palau. He was born a politician. For his environmental stewardship, he has earned the United Nations Champion of the Earth title, amongst many others. And the Honorable Joshua Tenorio is the 10th Lieutenant Governor of Guam. He has taken on many challenges in the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration, including political status development, and he's also the first openly gay Lieutenant Governor in the United States. And I'm Robert Underwood, and I'm the moderator for this event. For full disclosure, the Lieutenant Governor worked for me as a legislative assistant when I was in Congress, and all 3 presidents were commencement speaker at the University of Guam when I was president. I will ask each one to give a statement about the meaning of security to their nation or their territory. And we'll call each other by first names because we all have known each other for a long time. So Hilda, go ahead, Hilda.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for including me in this distinguished panel this morning. I mean, security is the topic of the day in the region. We're all talking about it, and I think it might mean different things to different people. But the important thing is that no one should forget that the future security of the Pacific region and what is good for the region should be primarily determined by the Pacific people. And whatever policy or agreement that is put together without consultation or close consultation with the Pacific people, either through their political, social, and traditional leaders, is deemed not appropriate for the Pacific. So I think that's very important for us going forward. ensuring that whatever agreement that speaks to security for the region, that has the interests of the Pacific people at heart. So I'll stop there. I think we'll talk a little bit more in terms of the meaning of Pacific security down the line, but I'll stop there and give the floor to the other leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. We'll go to Senior Statesman Manny Moring.
Thank you so very much, Congressman Robert. And it's very nice seeing friends is on the screen. The topic of discussion this morning is encompassing. It's not only for military security, but also for economic security. And I always look at this issue in the context that we are interdependent on each other, and we are a group of people. We used to be just one longer than we can imagine. We depend on Guam for a lot of things. Guam also depends on us for labor, and likewise, we depend on each other for many things. United States has been the grandfather to us. It has secured us from all kinds of wars and famine and you name it, typhoon. And I can see, I went to school in Guam and I see the progress made in Guam. And that was also during the Vietnam War. So United States, working with the alliances, Japan, Korea, Australia, and all the other countries around the Pacific, they seem to focus on Guam and the Micronesian islands because we have a strategic location and strategic value. And so we cannot separate each other. Whatever is affecting one, it would affect all the brothers and sisters. So I consider this opportunity to discuss the security for the Pacific, not only for the northern region, the Micronesian region, but for the entire Indo-Pacific region. I read the fact sheet, and I really agree to the strategy that U.S. and the alliances are putting together for the security of our India, Japan, Pacific countries, as well as the United States. So I can only say that this is a strategy that we should be part of it. And the more we learn about it, the more we support it. I also want to mention that FSM is the only country among I think all the countries in the Northern Pacific that has a political relationship with China. And we look at that as more of an economic partners. We depend entirely on the United States for both economic, political, as well as social. So we consider also the United States as our primary partner in economic and social development. If you ask me, where do most of the FSM citizens go for health, education, jobs, and so forth? Only United States, and that says everything. Nowhere else, only United States and its alliances. So let me stop here so I can and learn from you guys.
Thank you very much, Manny. And now we'll go to Tommy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, University of Guam and Pacific Center for Island Studies for putting this together. At the outset, let us join our fellow Pacific Island brothers and sisters and and really offer our prayers to the people of Ukraine. And together, let us condemn in the strongest terms the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I think we all believe and share in the passion that this invasion is really total disregard for human rights, for freedom, and the right for people to coexist with the nations of the earth. It is total disregard for respect of people to be able to exist as their own people and as their own country. And I think the key word here is respect, because as we move to the context of security in the Pacific, if there is no respect, then there's no peace. If there is no respect, there's no partnership. If there is no respect, really, there's hardly anything to be the foundation of what we are trying to achieve. So respect must come from the big and powerful nations as well as the small and vulnerable economies. But it's the whole idea of living side by side, whether you're big or small or rich or poor, you do have to have respect among ourselves. And I think when we get to talk about the issues of what is the Indo-Pacific strategy, what it will make it work, it will all boil down to the word respect. That's that's the opening statement that I would hope, as we discuss the various issues covering the strategy, that we also get a chance to hear from the people themselves who live in the Pacific. What is it that concerns the residents, the citizens, the people who occupy these islands? It shouldn't just be a one-way version of what that strategy should be or what that security should be. It's important that we sit on the table and our ideas are respected and our concerns are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that statement on Ukraine, and also introducing the concept of respect and as part of the currency of our relations, different relationships. And we'll see whether you're getting enough respect or not as we'll proceed with the conversation. Joshua.
Thank you. Just taking off the concept of respect, Guam finds itself, of course, in a interesting situation, always being an unincorporated territory of the United States, yet arguably a key part of Micronesia. So when we look at the situation with the independent nations in the region and their ability to align or develop a foreign policy based on the realities of this new competition, relatively new competition, I guess, in the Indo-Pacific. We, of course, have been burdened, certainly for many, many decades, with the responsibility of being sort of the anchor in which the foreign powers, including our own country, the United States, uses and is dependent on our position and our reality here in the Pacific to advance its national interests. And of course, this burden is great, and we just turn to our parents and grandparents who endured the burden of the big powers in a different time, in a different war, where the people of Guam, and in fact, arguably the people of Okinawa, had the burdens of the US and Japanese on the shoulders of the islanders, in which this great war was fought. And so for me, security in the Pacific Islands has, for us, we're seeing it firsthand with the rapid, or I guess the return of a rapid militarization, since in prior decades, we've seen even greater periods of militarization. And of course, the threats to security are still in the minds of the people of Guam, understanding that two nations have bombs called Guam killers. You know, it really is, it is a very, very big thing to try and deal with, on top of the burdens of trying to provide for our own economic security, and even in the face of this pandemic, threats to food security, all of us in the region. So we're living in a dynamic situation, and I think that more voices from the Pacific need to be heard. I think I'm really I'm looking forward to hearing the situation from the other leaders here. But it doesn't escape me, being the grandchild of war survivors, that the threat of security looms very big in this part of the world, and I think it's our responsibility to try and be very, very present and to be very, very involved in what is going to be happening here in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And all of you made excellent points, and I think in a sense, all of us, all five of us here are certainly to some extent victims of the previous major conflict here in World War II and all the Cold War and everything else that happened as a result of that. So what we're, the Indo-Pacific Plan, security plan, has been issued by the Biden administration. And in that effort, they've outlined a number of things, initiatives, and we're trying to figure out what does that Indo-Pacific Plan mean to the islands. And of course, they'll always, in the plan itself, it'll always make mention of things like, and it made mention of things like building resilience in the Pacific Islands and helping economic development. But it also referenced reinforcing the Quad, which is like China and, India, Japan, US, and Australia. And it also talked about leading the alliances. So it's always trying to figure out what is the real emphasis here, because you want to put in all the words about climate change, and you want to put in the words about economic development, but of course we're waiting to see how much effort is going to be exerted in those things. And so that seems to me that that's part of the challenge. Certainly the three presidents have had experiences with not only dealing with the compacts, implementing the compacts, dealing with the compacts. So maybe you can just tell us, what is your sense of the Indo-Pacific Plan of the United States, and how would be better stated or stronger? We're having a few audio problems with Hilda,
Yes.
but we'll tend to that. And how do you make it stronger? I know that the outlines of the plan always look very inviting because they reference everything, and I know that in some conversations, Pacific Island leaders want to just talk about climate change as the major existential security threat. Then there's talk about economic independence or economic sustainability as another issue of security. So, what is security for some is insecurity for others. What is security for some might lead to some insecurity for others. It's a kind of a balance effect. So I'm just curious, in your own experience of the three presidents, how do you see this plan, and how do you think it could be made stronger?
If I may respond, Robert, I read the fact sheet. I couldn't read the whole plan, but I did read the fact sheet, and it's very comprehensive. That's the strategy, but on the ground, we have yet to see all of it. it has started. We can see from discussions, including mobilization of funds and enactment of policies and discussion of partnership. So that has started. But I failed to get hold of this policy strategy rather before we have this discussion. But when I went through the fact sheets, it's a very comprehensive and it's well outlined. But let me go back to what Tommy talked about just for a while, the word respect, because we're dealing with very big, powerful, rich nations, and we are very small, tiny, and poor in the Pacific, upper region of the Pacific countries, in the Central Pacific. But when it comes to real needs, the United States has been there. If I could say, invoking some parts of this plan, let me talk about typhoon and rescue. They've been there, and they have involved very much in trying to secure our, together with Australia, secure our fish stocks, and that is our basic resources. So working together with all this, Japan has been helping us, United States has been helping us. So on the economic side, there is improvements. We can see evidence of these improvements. And obviously, let me go back to migration of our people. They're employed out there. So we're good on the economic side. On the security side, on political, we're of the opinion that the United States would always be there because we have that compact. Any foreign country that tries to take over our country, United States is there. However, we are also peaceful people. We want friends, and as I mentioned before, China, we have a relationship with China, and I can see the posturing that our political relationship with China is not really incongruent with our compact agreement with the United States. So we are trying to make the adjustment for our economic needs, but security, as the very good example is what is going on in Europe right now.
So just Manny, just to kind of put that relationship, you've mentioned the relationship with China a couple of times. So it's obviously easier for the president of the FSM to see President Xi than it would be to see President Biden. So is that an issue of respect for the FSM? Is that the kind of respect you're talking about? It just seems like, and let me ask this question, and maybe the others will respond to it as well. If there was no China-US competition, how would this strategy different, and how would it affect the nature of the compact negotiations that are ongoing? That's so.
That is a very good question, because we look at this competition as a advantage and benefit for us. When there is a competition, especially for political and economic, then they compete for the market, and we don't want to consider ourselves as a market, but they compete on who has influence, who has stronger influence in the region. Um, and I can assure you, with the money that the United States has given us, there's no other countries that has given us more money. Yes, China helps us at the United Nations for other, what do you call it, relationship and a few projects that we need that United States may not be able to provide us.
So,
But
Tommy, is that your sense of respect as well? What is the currency of the relationship, and what does this Indo-Pacific security plan say for you?
Oh. So when one describes security in Micronesia and the Pacific, I think we can synonymous that or correlate that with peace and harmony, because that's what life in paradise is all about. Unfortunately, we have to discuss military strategy because that seems to be the protector of ensuring that we have peace and harmony here. While we have not contributed to any war nor caused any war, unfortunately, it's foreign aggression that has been responsible for wars and lack of peace in our region. So we have to do our share also of being a part of the military strategy. That's why we're offering our lands, our water territories, and even our policies to include technology for military purposes. But it's unfortunate too that we only seem to become significant when there's aggression, foreign aggression about military. So when it comes to China and the United States competing military issues and security, quote unquote, concerns, then we become significant. That's why I like to ask the question, are we on the same page with what the security or strategies of the Indo-Pacific is all about? And I believe we're not totally on the same page. We may be very supportive on many aspects, but definitely not to the level where it should demand attention. For example,
Can you give us an example of where you might not be on the same page?
yeah, so for security, it's not military only for Palau and for Micronesia and Pacific and for keeping the peace. Security is about climate change. We're being overwhelmed with sea level rise, with typhoons and natural disasters. We're overwhelmed with coral bleaching and damages to our environment. Those are the lifelines of our life and existence. And therefore, any partners, United States, even China or any other developed nations, should also be sensitive to what it is that affects our stability, what it is that affects our security. So climate change, and then quickly into the economic sector. I think this is the frustrating part because it doesn't just involve the compact. It also involves partnership and investment on the private sector. It's really the Chinese investments and Taiwan investments that are in Palau. I love to see more US investments here in the private sector. That's what partnership is all about. That's what French is all about. And when it comes to the military, it's not just building technology or bases that I would hope that they bring the tourists to Palau. There's a lot of military vessels and tourists based in Guam, Hawaii, elsewhere that could also provide the necessary tourism industry support that we are all dependent upon. So those are just some of the examples. And where is the level of expectation? Are we on the same page? Because that's what partnership and respect should be. You don't just do a one-way street. You ask, what is it that you also want to do or contribute or realize?
Well, I think Manny's point that if you read the fact sheet, you'll see that all of these things are covered. You know, we're going to do economic development. They don't really address climate change directly. They call it resiliency, which is a kind of a euphemism for climate change. I'm not sure what resiliency means and all that. And welcome back, Hilda. And so I just wanted, before we go to you, and Josh, you know, one of the things about military presence, and I've been in lots of conversations about military presence with other Pacific Island leaders, and they always say, if we're not careful, we'll end up like Guam, as if it was like the worst thing that would ever happen. It's like you just have military everywhere. And of course, that's a kind of a situation to balance. But you obviously, you and I are part of an infrastructure where we're not in a position to negotiate anything. They just, you know, sort of show up. So how does this, how do you see this? Unmute him. Don't muzzle Josh.
All right, okay, here I am. You know, so let me just go back to what Tommy was saying, right? Because when you're talking, and we had this experience in the early 90s, and actually we've had this experience in waves where, you know, DoD planners and the military strategy result in the movement of assets and forces. And in the late 80s and early 90s, we were dealing with base realignment and closure, the closing of the Guam shipyard, the closing of the supply depot. And what it meant was it added on to the outward migration of people from Guam that were displaced economically. So when we see the economic benefits, and there's no question there's an economic benefit to billions of dollars being invested in an economy. Of course, not everything stays. You know, there are big players that take that money right back out, just like, unfortunately, some sectors in tourism, same thing. But you have to be able to focus on the economy. And I think what Tommy was saying is that if the U.S. is going to maybe regain some credibility in the economic development of Micronesia, there has to be a pipeline of private sector development that is involved. And I think, and of course, notwithstanding the fact that, yes, I think that the military or the U.S. government has been a very key in addressing natural disasters and calamities, which is their obligation, part of those agreements and part of their relationship with us here in Guam. But there has been a period of time when there really has not been a lot of attention from the highest levels. Only recently, it seems, people are trying to catch up. One of the reasons I think is policy with Micronesia sometimes is regulated to the Department of Interior. The freely associated states are not interior to the United States. And this causes, I think, a very structural problem where the State Department and the Department of Defense, who probably would be, and Commerce Department, who should be playing key roles in advancing the ties between the freely associated states and the US, should be more activated. But in this current structure, a lot of it gets regulated to, you know, the Office of Insular Affairs. No offense to our good friends there, but you know, again, the freely associated states are not interior to the United States. And even for us in the territories, when we go to the United Nations, I've had 2 meetings with the UN mission, and they'll ask me, what is your objective? And I tell them, I tell them, this is our one opportunity, opportunity to, in response to the United Nations interest and their mandate from the Committee on 24 to actually get some attention. So I'm very clear. I tell them, you know, we would like to get the attention of the highest levels of the US government in the Congress to deal with some unresolved political status issues that government of Guam and the people of Guam have never been have not been inconsistent with. We know that we want to address some longstanding flaws in the relationship that we have in the territorial status. But I thought it was very interesting, and I think it is true. If any one of the presidents made an appointment to see the president of China, they get the red carpet, and they will be priority visits. Here, it's hard to get some FaceTime. Last thing I want to mention is I'm more optimistic about climate change under this administration because the administration actually believes that there's a climate change problem. I mean, we just had a situation where there's climate change denial, but I see priority on that, and there's still a lot of room to make up. But in the foreign policy side and just even the engagement with the Pacific and the Pacific leaders, there needs to be more attention. And there is a lot of time, I think, that needs to be caught up by the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Hilda, what is the Indo-Pacific strategy and how can we make it better, huh?
Well, thank you, Robert. Yeah, sorry about the audio issue that I'm having. I'm in quarantine at the military base on Kwajalein, and I'm not sure what's going on with the internet connectivity here, but sorry about that. In terms of the Indo-Pacific strategy, it's clear that it's a response to the geopolitical competition in the region. It's not a response to the need of the Pacific people. If it was a response to the need of the Pacific people, it would address climate change first and foremost in the way that it needs to be addressed. The Pacific Island Forum at its meeting in 2018 made it clear that the climate crisis is the single most important security issue for the region, for the well-being of the people. And yet, implementation of the Paris Agreement is not something that is high on the list of the Quads and even the United States. So it's not being responsive to the security issues of the Pacific region. We're talking about the nuclear issue in the Marshall Islands. That's a security issue for us. It's also becoming an issue for the rest of the Pacific because we're seeing the leakage of the leaking of the poisonous gas from the Ruined Dome and poisoning the fish in the waters of the Pacific. That's a security issue for us. Then you go and talk about the maritime resources and maritime boundaries. That's also a security issue for the region. We know that if the sea level rise continue to be as predicted and our islands are submerged, what happens to the sovereignty of our countries and to the maritime boundaries? The U.S. strategic denial rights is based on the maritime boundaries. What's going to happen there when the issue of sea level rise impact our existence? This is a very important issue for us, and yet it's not a priority as we see in the actions of our donor partners, especially United States, Australia, and other countries in the region. So I think as long as the responses of the U.S. and its allies are not consistent, they're not lasting, they're not in consultation with us, then we will continue to have an Indo-Pacific strategy that is not addressing the needs of the Pacific region.
Yeah. But to the concerns over climate resiliency, which is how it's phrased in the Indo-Pacific Plan, is kind of like a partial response to that. But I've heard many people, not openly, but sort of in a private way, oh, those people from the Pacific Islands, they're just raising climate change. They don't really understand the real strategic threats, and they're using climate change as a way to simply get more attention and more resources. That's a kind of a cynical attitude, but I've heard that expressed. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think those responses come from a place of inadequate information. People don't know what is happening on the ground, especially on low-lying islands like the Marshall Islands and other places in the Pacific. I mean, we're already seeing, we're spending inordinate amount of our resources building seawalls to ensure that our islands remain and our people are secure. Then there is the food security issue, because not only are the fishes in our region migrating to other places where the water is cooler, but also the inundation of and the water seeping into our soil make it very difficult to grow food. So these are not imaginary issues. They are real, and people are facing these on a daily basis.
Very good, very good. Let's just go quickly to the compact negotiations, and this is something that people have there apparently is not the kind of high-level attention that's been given by the Biden administration, although I have it in good authority that they're going to appoint a negotiator pretty soon that's of sufficient level. But, my understanding is that there's no real negotiations going on because there's been no one from the U.S. side that's sort of comparable to the FSM side and the RMI side. So do you have any comments on that? And how do you see this moving forward?
The negotiation really must be conducted in a dignified manner and must address a range of issues in addition to the financial and financial programs, which of course matters, the economic provisions of the compact. But first, the agenda and scope of the talks must look at issues from previous compacts. Those needs to be addressed before moving on to the extension of the current compact. We're talking about the compact of 1986 and the one in 2003. There were unpaid. There were issues that were not resolved from those two compacts. There were unpaid compensation promised in law. This was unilaterally nullified by the U.S. This is the tax and trade provisions that I'm referring to, and the United States still owe the FSM and the Marshall Islands for nullifying this provision. Then there was also the supplemental education grant that was put into place in 2003. The amount of funds earmarked under the supplemental education grant was never given in the as stated in the treaty. Yeah. Since 2006, they have not given us the amount stated there, plus inflationary requirement that is part of the agreement. So those need to be settled. Additionally, the asymmetry between the U.S. having strategic rights regarding our borders and foreign interactions is an indefinite agreement, whereas the economic provision is short-lived. Those need to go hand in hand. If we're going to have a strategic denial right that a provision that is 88 years or 80 some years long, and economic provision that is only 20 years long, that doesn't make sense. I think those need to go hand in hand. So that needs to be clarified. So these are some of the issues that the Marshall Islands negotiator brought to the table when they started talking to them in 2020.
But
of course, that is stopped.
Who are they talking to now? Who's on the
they're
US
not
side?
talking to anybody. So that's what I'm saying. They started talking, and then things stopped in 2020, and they haven't picked up since then. Okay. It's important for the nuclear justice issue to be on the table. Okay. And the Marshall Islands government has stated that unless that issue is on the table, they're not coming to the discussions or to the talks.
Okay, let's
So
go.
that is there. And then there is also the climate change is there, is also included in the points of discussion. So it's clear that one of the issue is the level of representative from the U.S. and the need for the U.S. to appoint a presidential envoy.
Yeah.
That gives credence to the importance of these talks.
So maybe to go to Josh's point, they're going to give you somebody from Interior to talk to. Manny, what is the current state of negotiations as you understand them?
Yeah, as we all know, next year was supposed to have been the end of the financial assistance to both the Marshall Islands and the FSM. The posturing in the Northern Pacific has changed the attitude of the United States. They want to negotiate the financial package. The United States always said the money that we build for the trust fund is adequate. And the GAO came out several times, disputed that opinion, that money, and I agree, is not going to be enough. So that's where we come from. The money is not enough. You are going to terminate the compact. Good thing that there's some competition up there, and it forced
Get some attention.
just like Hilda mentioned, there's nobody on the United States side ready to discuss all these things that they said. Well, we agreed. Nothing committed to writing. So they said, yeah, we've successfully progressed, but nothing that they can disclose to the public.
Okay.
And the climate change all of a sudden becomes a very urgent matter to FSM, because recently the water rise went up about a foot or so, went into the taro patch, and without even a typhoon. So I said, look, if a typhoon comes, that water is going to translate into 8 feet all the way into the taro patches and all the roads and stuff. So I just came from Chuk talking about what is the best way to deal with this climate change. We kind of position ourselves between the Marshall Islands and Palau. So I asked, what about if we move up to the high mountains? Or what about the other islands? I said, move them to the other islands as well. To the high highlands as well. So there's complication, but next year, 2023, is going to be the end of the financial package. And we still don't know what is going on. They said, oh, it's more positive. I said, let's see that in writing.
That's right.
Nobody
Okay.
showed anything in
Very
writing.
good. So both the RMI and the FSM, who are supposed to be currently in conversations, don't have anything in writing.
Let me just quickly inject one thing, that the implementation of the compact has been a painful process. So we asked that they amend they call it the physical procedure. I'll give you one example. I can understand New York City, requiring a concrete road of 19 inches. They have 18-wheelers and all these huge trucks. Tell me if there is any such truck within FSM. No, we only have light trucks. So why 9 inches? And they said, well, that's federal government requirement. I said, can you be real? Give us what we need, not what is required of your money. So let me end over there. I'm sure that.
So the reach of federal authority follows the money. Okay.
There you go.
Tommy.
Thank you, Robert. Very quickly, everyone's concerns really boils down to this. Um, if we define or talk about security, we are going to be overwhelmed with foreign countries' version of what security should be like. But perhaps, as we discussed, Robert, you and I, and maybe Heini earlier, if we ask the question, what are the insecurities of the islands? Maybe that's a better question to deal with, because then you can get down to the front line, to the ground, and really answer the people's insecurities.
Yes.
Having said that, that's the thing about this compact that kind of saddens me is the fisherman's adage, and I mentioned this before. As a fishermen always say, don't worry about the fish that's already in the net. Worry about the fish outside the net. And I just feel sometimes that even as we together are the United States' closest friends, we get treated as fish already in the net. And therefore, we don't receive the needed attention that friends and partners should receive. It's only when there's civil disobedience or where there's war, either directly or indirectly, that we seem to get our significance because we're strategic. Other than that, I wish the compact would address really the basic necessities of partnerships. Because for Palau, for example, we have given up our lands. We have given up our territorial, even our airspace. They're going to build the latest communication technology to monitor the Pacific. So it's not like they're giving us free money in the compact. And I want to stress that. There's no free money in the compact or assistance for Palau. This is a partnership. There are already major portions of land that are reserved exclusively for US military. And there are portions of land that are already reserved for mutual purposes, like ports, airports, and that. So there's no free things in here. We are doing our share. And I like the statement made by Secretary of State Blinken, shared responsibility and shared prosperity. I only wish we would concentrate more on the shared prosperity aspect, because there is shared responsibility, even to the point where our sons and daughters are serving the greatest ratio of induction into the US military. So it doesn't bother me that when people say, hey, a tiny nation like Palau, why are you signing on to the coalition of the willing? Why are you worried about the wars involving the US? And I have to remind them that our sons and daughters are participating directly, even though we don't have military. So those are the things that make me proud of our relationship with the US. Unfortunately, we have to answer what are the insecurities of Micronesia and for the Pacific. Because if you answer them, then you can also answer the compact things. The compact, I agree with Josh. We are like an insular affairs when it shouldn't be that way. And there should be somebody with proper authority and decision making to really take this step forward so that we don't go back and forth, and it's just a never-ending process. And when war breaks out in Ukraine, we become even less significant on the table of the Ministry of State or Defense or Interior, for that matter.
Okay,
so there's so many things that we really need to focus on and improve on. And I just think that it's sad sometimes when we in Micronesia and the Pacific, especially those of us who are closely aligned with the US, we should be the bright examples. We should be the things that the US say, hey, here's what a most powerful country in the world is doing with the least developed economies and who believe in freedom, who believe who have principles and values. We're friends with Taiwan, a very small country that's also threatened by China. But for us, it's not the money that Taiwan is. It's the shared values and principles that we believe we are more closely aligned with Taiwan. And so we get a lot of flack, especially in the United Nations. We're blindsided for many opportunities, simply because China will not give us the necessary vote of support. So we've lost on that. And in a way, I like to thank our brothers from the FSM. You know, they have their relationship with China, and they should, because we don't have enemies. We should be able to choose who our friends are. But whether it's China, US, Australia, Japan, or the developed nations of the world, the thing is, please pay respect, please pay attention to the true partnership and the true security and insecurities of your friends. Then we'll be on the same page.
Okay. So let me, we only have a few minutes left, so I need to ask a couple of questions, but let me just give a minute or two to Josh to explain the Guam perspective, or maybe a point of view on the compact negotiations. Should Guam have a role?
Guam should have a role, and actually our friends in Micronesia support us having a role. And sometimes it's because we are the closest ones to our level of engagement with each other is very high. But of course, we are one of the host areas host islands where we see the outward migration caused by the economic insecurity and the healthcare insecurity. And so we should be at the table, even if it's just to understand and listen to the context of the understanding between the two sovereign countries at the table, right? The U.S. versus any one of the freely associated states. To be honest with you, I feel that Department of Defense probably is in support of this because when they talk with us and they talk with me and the governor, two big things that we both talk about is the need for the U.S. federal government to address the economic insecurity, maybe I don't say it insecurity, but economic development of the three countries, but also even in terms of humanity, addressing the healthcare systems there. A lot of people are being displaced from the islands because of the healthcare disparity and the lack of healthcare access. And in fact, when I'm in Hawaii, meeting with our friends, it pains me that a big portion of the homeless population are Micronesians that initially went to Hawaii for healthcare, but have been displaced because they do not have the resources either to make it back or they have to stay there for their loved ones. So those are two areas we always talk with the Department of Defense that they need to convince the other sectors of the federal government to go and focus in these two areas if they're going to make sure and advance the quality of life for the region. And obviously this should underline the defense strategy of the United States, is taking a look at the actual situation that the people of Micronesia in all areas are dealing with. But for us, I think, we realize that being part of, are we part of the domestic? We're not sure either, because we're not in the U.S., but we're treated as if we are, right? We're unincorporated territory.
Well,
but
it says so right in the Supreme Court. You are domestic in a foreign sense.
Correct. And property, right? But I think that at least for us to understand what the relationship and what the agreement is going to be, and for us to give the federal government the practical realities and consequences of their decision. They're very, so I think that probably what sums it up for us. Okay. And so far, our friends in Micronesia are definitely open and willing to let us at least sit in. We realize that we're not going to be playing a role, nor is it our responsibility to directly negotiate. But at least since we're going to be the first place impacted by the consequences of the decisions, we certainly should be there to understand what the intent is of the partnership.
Well, thank you for that. And let me ask this question, and I want everyone to kind of have a quick response to it. According to GAO, maybe 1/3 of the money that is the funding of the government of the RMI and the FSM comes from the U.S. through the compacts. and about 25% of the Republic of Palau comes through the compact. So the question is, really, are you in any position to ever have a plan for economic self-sufficiency, given the reality that the compact funding, even as sometimes the way that it's let out is, you know, sort of haphazard and not really even done according to the way it was originally thought, particularly in reference to the trust fund. You know, many people that I've talked to who work in the federal government over the years say, well, they're just, these countries are just dependent upon us, and that's just the way it works, and, you know, they're not really in a strong position to negotiate anything. I have to ask the question.
I would like to start, but I want us to keep going. You know, we have a lot of opportunities, and we have certain things that other do not have. My coming from the private sector, if the United States helps us to install the necessary infrastructure that can help both social and economic programs, I think we have a very positive promise for the future. We have sunshine. We don't have wars. We have peace. We're right next to Guam. If Guam can develop, why can't we? And we have more natural resources than Guam, but they have the infrastructure. And what attracts foreign investment? It's the infrastructure. The workers have to have skills. You have to have communication. You have to have transportation. Guam has all that because of the typhoons, the buildup from the Vietnam War, and you know, the attraction that is Guam is just neighbor to Guam. So these are the advantages that Guam has. Why can't we have the same level of infrastructure? So one of the secretaries from Interior asked me, why is that Guam is developed and you're not? I said, well, look at the level of infrastructures that Guam has, because Guam is the United States. If we are given these kind of opportunities, I am very sure the dependency will reduce by at least 50%. That's my take.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Hilda, Tommy?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the duration of the compact and what has taken place in terms of economic development, when we started out, a very small percentage of the budget came from local resources, from general funds. Since then, our fisheries resources, our revenue have grown and have contributed quite a bit to our budget process. So you're seeing that economic developments is taking place. It's taken longer than expected. And I agree with President Manny's point about U.S. helping with infrastructure. Right now, a lot of our fish are not processed in our country, and we're losing the resources that would have come if the fish was processed in country rather than being sent out. We right now don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that. This is an area that the U.S. can help build so that we're not so reliant on U.S. compact funds. So it's not something that we're not working towards, and I think it's something that we hope that in the future we will be able to take care of our own need. The issue of the trust fund is another one that is in the future will help us with our expenditures, because the interest from the trust fund is supposed to be there to contribute to our budgetary process. Right now, it's getting there. It's not there yet as envisioned by the U.S., but it is being built, and it will be there to help us. there are other things that U.S. can do. When you look at air transportation, we have only one airline going through our island. It's now costing us $3,000 to go from Majuro to Hawaii. I mean, how do you build an economy with these kinds of monopoly, I guess? And this is an area that the U.S. can help us with. And they're not, and shipping as well. And so there are opportunities for the U.S. to help build the economic base of our countries, and it should be doing that in the coming, under the coming compact extension. But I wanted to also go back to an issue that Josh brought out about health, because I think this is a very important issue for us in the Marshall Islands. We have a cancer rate that is more than the average worldwide. And a lot of it is due to the, of course, the nuclear legacy. And it's important for the U.S. to help us build our health infrastructure so that most of our healthcare needs can be done in country. Right now, most of our people live for the U.S. to get the treatment necessary. Yeah. Why isn't it possible for this to be one of the issues taken care of by the compact discussion? It has to be. I agree that we're burdening Guam with our sick people as well as Hawaii, but we just don't have the infrastructure. It has to be built up, and the U.S. can help us get that first-class health facilities in our regions. I'll stop there.
I just wanted to add,
Tommy.
Go
ahead, Josh.
Let me add that that would be a great buildup that would benefit the region and would actually advance the U.S. security interests, is a buildup in healthcare. And many of us know that we could build a very reasonable, practical, regional healthcare infrastructure, understanding that, of course, Guam, with the largest population and with access to reliable infrastructure, can play and does play a role. But we can, I think the natural interest as Micronesians is, of course we want to help each other out. But to me, you know, if federal government can, in a big picture, advance a movement to have a healthcare buildup, it really is going to be far impactful, including for the economic development of the entire region. Investors want to move where there is safety and security for their families. We know that the military security is there, the legal framework for democracy is there, but the human infrastructure can be definitely improved. It could stabilize the region, and it certainly dovetails well with the U.S. security interests. And let me just say, I am concerned about the security situation. All of us are, I'm sure. And everybody here realizes what the role we're playing and the role we are likely to play if the competition escalates into a conflict, because we're the ones that are going to be living here no matter what.
And, you know, hopefully the healthcare build-up infrastructure won't be impeded by the military build-up infrastructure.
No, I think, to me,
it seemed to be happening not too far from where I am right now. When we contemplated, the government of Guam contemplated building a hospital, and then the military said, no, not so fast. Yeah.
Well, the elements, right, of the military. But like I said, to me, if part of the Department of Defense mission in our region is also to be the front line for humanitarian assistance, I don't see why they wouldn't use military assets and use the NDA option to push in that infrastructure concurrent to the compact aid that is going to be guaranteed, hopefully in the future, by the federal government. I think it should be an add-on. And anyway, that's
okay. Tommy.
I think many people in DOD agree.
I'm sure
Robert,
I'm sure they have interesting conversations with you. Go ahead, Tommy.
Listen, I agree with really everything that's been said and laid out on the table, and I think we can all share in that. Perhaps our united wish for all of us is that the compact takes a different focus than what it is right now, which is simply about crunching numbers and direct financial assistance and all that. I, I really wish the compact would be looked at as a total package. And again, I go back to my thing. It shouldn't be just about direct financial assistance. It should be also about investment in the private sector. There is so much that growing the economy of Marshalls, Palau, FSM, and what have you, would really contribute to making a big difference. So I like to look at the compacts more like help us to help ourselves. It's not just, we give you this much money this year and now we wait for the next 15 years to renegotiate another. Let's put in a clear language in the compact that the U.S. shall also encourage private sector companies to invest in the economy of Micronesia. And then very quickly on the last year at COP26, the U.S. announced $150 billion to climate change. Please divert or direct some of that money to Micronesia so we can focus on clean energy, on renewable energy and all that. It can make a world of difference in how America's best friends here in the Pacific will be looked at. Unfortunately, it's French companies, German companies, and European companies that have come to the islands and talked about renewable energies and how they can apply the technology. Why can't the U.S. take the lead on this? Again, I mentioned about military. I know people on our islands are very sensitive about land use and military base build-up. But thank goodness there's Guam. We don't need to build another base in Palau. But what I'm trying to say is there are some military exercises, for example, like maritime enforcement through Coast Guard. Why can't they do those kind of exercise? And by doing that, they're helping Palau to also monitor our 200-mile exclusive water zones. Those are the things so that Palau doesn't have to invest on getting ships and personnel and technology to monitor our waters. That's a security issue for us, but we already have our best friend in charge of security around here. So whether it's ship riding or regular enforcement, that'll be a welcome thing. And tourism, there's so much tourism numbers in the U.S. military. Please send some of those to Palau or to FSM and to the Marshalls. Hilda made a very good point on the airlines. We're spending $900 close to for one-way ticket now to the Philippines. Because simply for the lack of competition and people have no choice but to do that. So when are we going to really get a partnership going? And that's my view on the compact. Shared responsibility, shared prosperity. Before I forget, Robert, I mentioned the mutual use of Palau's land, and that specifically includes airports and shipyard, port areas, seaport areas. So since it's the U.S. going to use this and not just Palau, invest some to enlarge the port, enlist some of the resources to make a longer airport or a better airport runway, not just for military, but maybe Palau can begin to expand on its infrastructure. So there's a lot of things already spelled out in the compact that are not implemented and the potential that they could be. And we don't have to negotiate additional monies for this, but simply to have a shared responsibility and shared prosperity at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, all of you have just made very terrific points, and it's trying to figure out what is that, what is important to Pacific Islands, and that this is not just a financial arrangement; it's a partnership, and there's issues of respect and regard, and there's real issues of economic development. The last question I want to ask, and I want you to think about this very seriously. some people say that this war in the Ukraine will put out of focus all of the kinds of concerns that we have here. I don't think that will be the case in the long run because, you know, this is still a very vibrant and important part of the world. And then as we talk about the compacts and we talk about the relationships, it's clear that all of us here have a much longer memory about what that means than most of the officials that we run into in Washington, D.C., who seem to have a very short memory about what was previously arranged or what was discussed, or there's just a constant change of characters. Of course, there's a change of administrations, and so that feeds that. But, you know, why is the Micronesian region important? Why is it important? Why should it be important to the United States? Why is it important to the rest of the world? You know, why? Other than the fact that we live here, we think in the Micronesian region we are important, but why does Micronesia matter?
Can I make a very quickly? I'll just try to wrap it in a minute. Anyway, I think Micronesia is important because of our shared values and principles with the United States. For Palau, that's a very important factor. We do certainly want to be friends with people that respect us. We want to be friends with people who share those values of freedom and democracy. And our Constitution actually says that. We must honor traditions and values and also adhere to democratic principles and values. So at the end of the day, we want a partnership. We want to work and support countries that promote these ideals. And that's very important for us. And so when we have aggression of countries that come and invade our borders for illegal fishing or for our territorial integrity and rightful passage, it worries us because that concerns our tranquility and peaceful island life. That's why the U.S., I believe, is also very cognizant of the fact that there are strategic values that Micronesia can offer. Guam, of course, is the center of the defense and the Marshall Islands. But we can't help but be in the region close to those defense bases. And we cannot afford to have foreign powers within 150 miles who do not believe in those kind of principles. But the sad thing is, and I will be honest, China is coming through the Pacific storming. You know, there's a lot of members of the Pacific Island Forum who used to recognize Taiwan and were talking about values and principles, and now because of economic considerations, they're already friendly with China. Why is China very relevant now? It's their aggressive diplomacy, their aggressive economic diplomacy. They're doing the things that people are crying about, and they're investing. They're also doing the small things that show respect. That, like you mentioned earlier, the president of FSM can go directly to China. So it's the little things that count. It's the little things that we value. But for those of us very close to the U.S., I think they have to take us more seriously and not just be on a defensive or responsive manner. Let's take some proactive measure. Again, we are brothers and sisters, so let's take care of the family.
You don't want to be the fish in the net. You want to be the fish that's not caught yet. I like that.
Oh,
Nanny.
yeah. When it comes to the United Nations, we become extremely important because it's one vote, one voice, or one country. There's a lot of resolutions I recall that were against U.S. standing, but U.S. rallied and get all the Micronesian votes when it also comes to voting on Israel issues, which is very sensitive. We're the only region that really backs Israel consistently. So we're important on the world stage. We have a role to play. But we are poor, we're isolated. And a lot of folks look at it as like, where are you guys? And admittedly, we're small. But we have certain things that are quite important. Our strategic location is the most important one to this partnership. We're in the transportation lane or economic lane for shipping, as well as air refueling. So we play that important role, but we're being dominated by the importance of the United States, and the United States look at us as part of the interior. In most respects, we're part of the interior. Let's face it. We rather deal with the State Department or the Defense Department because they have other things that we actually need. Military emphasize the importance of climate change. Climate change to U.S. Security is very important. I think we have a role to play. We're very important. We're connected with Japan and most Asian countries, of course, United States and Japan. Our location is critically important, strategic. It's just that we have this very funny situation where we're independent countries, and yet we have a very functioning relationship with the United States because of our friendship and partnership. And that's where we want to go with Japan, United States, working within this strategic. But those issues that we should, I totally agree with Tommy, that we should look at the insecurities. Our insecurities is paramount to us, and there's so much. When we go into negotiation with the United States, they talk about security. But we should be talking really about our insecurity, especially climate change and economic and social issues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hilda, and then we'll go to Josh,
Yeah.
and then I got to
Well,
wrap it up.
Yeah, Robert, I think the importance of Micronesia depends on who you're talking to and perspective of different players. So from the U.S. perspective, we're important as the third island chain of whatever it is. We're supposed to help defend the U.S. In terms of their occupation of our areas and using these islands as the a place to help control aggression from other countries. So from that perspective, we're important. And we see all the military bases that are being built across the region. We've seen the history and know about the nuclear legacy, what happens. Because of our remoteness, they were able to do certain things that they wouldn't do in other places. So there is a strategic importance for being remote and nobody sees us because they can do all sorts of things. Then there is also what the president of FSM mentioned about voting in the United Nations. Of course, our votes count there as well. And we get lobbied from different countries who want to get our support. So that is that as well. And there is the resources that are available in our countries, are in our oceans. Our fish is there. It's quite a lucrative area for fishing, for the fishing industry. So that's an important element of Micronesia. There is the deep sea minerals that are also down there and being coveted by different companies that want to explore. So, there are different aspects of Micronesia that makes it very important to United States, to China. Of course, China wants to be controlling this region because they and the United States are in competition for control and ownership of this region. So because of all of these different interests, Micronesia is important. For us, of course, Micronesia is important because of our cultures, our way of life, and people, distinct people that occupy these islands. We're important. So of course, we're important to the rest of the world and to us especially. And so, as I said, it depends on who you're talking to and what perspective. But the fact is, we are important regardless of how small our land masses are. We occupy a very important location in the Pacific.
Thank you. And wrap it up, Josh, and then I gotta.
Got to wrap it up. So, for me, obviously, Micronesia, the area of Micronesia is, I would say, one of the most dynamic parts of the Pacific Ocean. Its close proximity to Southeast Asia, and the vastness in a relatively unexplored area. And I think that the decisions that the independent countries of Micronesia have, the authorities they have to protect and to allow or to establish parameters in which this vast part of the world in the Pacific is going to be explored. That's the importance. The importance of it. To me, primarily, it's economic, ecological, and then, of course, as Hilda said, we're from here, so it's important to, we've been here for thousands of years, and we're going to be here thousands of years from now. Right? Exactly.
Yes.
Very good. Well, thank you all. I mean, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank PBS Guam for helping us make this possible. I also want to thank the Pacific Center for Island Security, which is a new kind of think tank that, as many of you know, myself and Ken Cooper and Leland Bettis are trying to organize. If you look at our logo, you can see that our definition of Indo-Pacific has a big breadfruit leaf right in the middle. And that's because we're important, and all of the islands in the middle there have used breadfruit for centuries as their main staple. Fortunately, you don't need a whole lot of fresh water to grow it, because otherwise climate change wrecks the taro patches, as pointed out by Manny. So thank you very much. This is a wonderful activity on behalf of PCIS and PBS Guam and our affiliations and our friendship. Thank you very much. Have a great day.